Hey, before we get started, a completely normal, non-suspicious question. You don't happen to work for Boeing, do you? Phew, okay, good. That's a relief. And welcome to Groove Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderlycone, and in this episode, we're going to be building the Boeing Starliner from Metal Earth. And if you're new to 3D metal model building, I know that this can look a little bit intimidating, but don't worry. By the end of this video, anything that you build will be way more structurally sound than anything Boeing's put out over the last 2 years. But when it comes to building the Starliner, there are a few questions that we have to ask, like what tools do you need? What are the tricky bits? And how does this whole thing go together? Well, these are all great questions, and we're going to get the answers. Let's get down to the workbench and open up our package. And boom, just like that, we begin building the Metal Earth Boeing Starliner. And as you can see here, there's really not a whole lot of parts. So let's go ahead and dive right into it, starting off with our instructions. Now, if you've never built a 3D metal model before, the first thing you need to understand is we're going to take all of these different parts here and we're going to bend and shape them to the instructions right above. Once we have our parts properly shaped, we need to connect them together. And the way that we do that is with the insertion holes and tabs. Basically, we take our tabs and put them into the insertion holes and then either twist or bend the tabs depending on how it's indicated in the instructions with those circles and triangles. Every time we see a triangle, we want to give that tab a twist. Every single time we see a circle, we want to give it a bend. For most builds, it's super important to pay attention to the instructions for how they want them to be secured. Sometimes if you secure a tab by either twisting it or bending it when you were supposed to bend or twist it, these tabs can get in the way of other parts. With this particular build, you don't need to worry about that too much, but it's still a good idea to follow the instructions so that everything goes together pretty seamlessly. Next up, we need to talk about tools, and for this particular build, I recommend a good pair of nippers. These are great for cutting out all of our pieces and making sure that everything comes out nice and clean from our part sheet. If you try to bend these pieces out from the part sheet without using a pair of nippers, you run the risk of accidentally breaking parts or warping them beyond usage before even getting to build with them. So avoid all that headache, get yourself a good pair of nippers and cut out all your pieces. It will save you a ton of time. The next tool I recommend is a good pair of pliers. Now these are my Metal Time pliers and I absolutely love these for a majority of our builds. They're really great, they have a really good control on them, and they have a nice little sharp tip there that's nice and flat. Another thing about them is that they're completely smooth on the inside. This way you don't have to worry about the teeth on other pliers ruining the parts as you build with them. Make sure if you're using a good pair of pliers that they are completely smooth on the inside, because again, you will damage pieces. Alternatively, you could look at a good pair of tweezers. Tweezers are the classic building tools of 3D metal models. They're great for the majority of the builds. One thing to know is that a good pair of tweezers is hard to find. Most tweezers are just not able to bend some of these pieces. You want to make sure you have a good strong set. Go into your mom or wife's cupboard and take a look at theirs. If they have really strong ones, just grab them real quickly and put them back afterwards. You don't want to deal with that, but using a good strong pair of tweezers is really best recommended for building these 3D metal models. The next tool I'm going to recommend is our dapping punch. These are great for all of our domes, combs, and cylinders, and all we're going to do is take our part, put it on the mouse pad, and give it a nice little press back and forth just like this. That will allow us to have a really nice uniform shaping, and if you can't find a dapping punch around your home, you can substitute this for a big marker. They will do the exact same thing, although this one's a little bit more purpose-built. Finally, something that kind of complements this guy right here is our, if I can find it, dapping block. Now I know what you're thinking. This is kind of overkill for this build, and I would completely agree. But This little guy here is great for all of our doming needs. All we do is place our part in a bigger piece first, and then we put the little dapping punch in here and we give it a little rock around like that. It'll create a perfect dome almost every single time. And these guys are really cool. They are a little bit expensive, but if you're gonna be building these models, I highly recommend one. Now, these are just our recommendations, and you really don't need anything but nippers and tweezers to build this model. But of course, having these extra tools will make everything a lot easier for you. All right, we looked at our instructions and we talked tools. Let's get down to the build. The cone. Now in this particular case, when it comes to shaping our cone, like I said earlier, using that dapping punch to run it back and forth will get you a nice cone shape. The key here though, is to make sure you're applying even pressure the entire time. If you let up on the edges, you'll actually have a little area that's kind of completely straight like this. So you'll have a complete circle and a straight bit like that. It doesn't look good. You really want to follow all the way through that piece. And once you'll do, you'll have a really nice little cone here. Now another thing to keep in mind, and you'll actually see me kind of bounce back and forth in this build with this, is that you want to shape this first. You really want to shape the bigger pieces, whether it be the cone or the massive cylinder that we're doing later, before adding any of the add-on detail. If you add the detail on before you shape this, you're going to find that the part really doesn't want to shape the way that you want it to go. And that's because the tabs get in the way of the metal coming in contact with our tool. Again, wait to put on the outside details until you have this part shaped. It'll make your life so much easier. Page 3, Part 10. Now, like I said earlier with our cone, it's kind of important here that we add on the details after we shaped Part 10. Trying to do it like I am right now is going to leave some anomalies in the outside, and it won't be perfectly cylindrical. I could have gone through this with my pliers and tried to really bend it out, but it just really was already kind of going the wrong way. So instead, I tried my best to correct it with my dapping set, and I think it actually turned out pretty well. The thing is, though, you don't want to be like me, ever. What you want to do instead is make your life a lot easier, and you're going to go ahead and you're bend that little part 10 first. This way, you're not struggling with all the detailed pieces. Everything will just go right into place, and you'll be singing songs the entire time, unlike me fiddling with little small parts. Finally, page 4, parts 15. And yeah, I said parts because we're making 4 of these little engines. Now, like earlier, you can use a dapping punch to get a really nice uniform shape for all 4 of these engines. Alternatively, though, if you don't have a dapping punch or want to do it a different way, you can use your tweezers or pliers to get the same effect. What we want to do with this is go right up to the edge of one of our pieces, and then we want to give it a little bend. And we're going to move the tweezers or pliers down a little bit and do the same thing. And we're going to repeat this step a ton of times. And eventually, when you get to the other side, you'll see that the part has created a cool little cone. Now the key here is to make sure that the tabs at the top where everything is narrowed are completely straight. If they're not straight, they will be kind of hard to put into our insertion holes, and if you're trying to jam it in there, you might scratch the paint, which who wants scratched paint? No, my friends, take your time with this particular piece and just make sure those are nice and 90 and everything should go together nice and well. Or nice and good, good and nice. One of those things will work. Now, let's finish up this build. And boom, there we have it. The Metal Earth Boeing Starliner in all of its glory. Yeah, it's a little smaller than I was expecting too, but it was still a lot of fun to put together. Really didn't have a whole lot of parts and only took about 2 hours in total with me fumbling with my camera. Are there some complicated details here? No, not really. I would say it's more about the instructions and how they tell you to form some of the pieces. In particularly the little triangle here at the top, or I should say the cone up here at the top, and the bottom details right here. In both cases, they tell you to kind of start shaping them and then put the outer details on first and then complete the shaping. If you follow this method, you'll find that the little cone here on the top might not be shaped just the way you like it. And the bottom piece here might have some weird anomalies in it. And that's because when we put the outer details on these pieces and then try to shape them again, those little tabs that we've used to connect those pieces get in the way of our shaping. So in my personal opinion, I think it's best to go ahead and try to get those bigger pieces shaped exactly the way you like it before adding those details on. It's really easy to shape the outside details, so you don't need to do that. Again, shape the bigger pieces first, then put the details on. You'll save yourself a lot of headache. Now, can I recommend this build for new builders out there? Well, absolutely. While there might be some, complicated shapings like the top dome here and some of our rocket boosters, I don't think there's any details here that will frustrate people to the point where they'll be throwing the model into the garbage. I think that this build here is perfect for anyone out there who's looking to expand their space collection or are just looking to get into the hobby and want to start with something that can give them a good idea about what it has to offer. I think this is a perfect one for your collection, and if you're interested in picking it up, I would say go ahead and do it. You're not going to be disappointed. All right, Groovers, that brings us to the end of our episode. I had a really good time building the Boeing Starliner with you, and if you guys had a good time, go ahead and press that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well, as we got all kinds of cool content coming out in the future, and I would love to have you there. Looking to pick up your own Boeing Starliner? Well, check out groupbuilders.ca. We have all kinds of great models on there with great prices and fast shipping to the United States and Canada. Until next time, keep building. All right, now it's finally time to take a drink. I am parched. Didn't break. Maybe next time.